There he goes. There it goes.
In the early 1990s, the world watched as a powerful international coalition took on dictator Saddam Hussein in the deserts of Kuwait and Iraq. ITN journalists covered the war in all its devastating detail, and much of the footage they have captured has never been seen before. In the decades since, the conflict has also appealed to filmmakers. But how do Hollywood portrayals of the Gulf War measure up to reality? In this episode, we dissect iconic scenes from movies like Jarhead,
We're trying to get away.
Three Kings,
I already did this story.
and Live from Baghdad, comparing them with authentic ITN archival footage. From the Highway of Death, to the bombing of Baghdad, to Saddam Hussein's infamous sit-down interviews, we unveil the stark differences and similarities between cinema and reality. To support this new series, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a comment to let us know what you think about the video. Perhaps the best-known cinematic depiction of the Gulf War is Sam Mendes' 2005 film, Jarhead, based on the memoir of Anthony Swafford, a US Marine who served in the Gulf conflict, and starring Jake Gyllenhaal.
My combat action has commenced.
In one scene, Gyllenhaal's character and his squad mates stumble upon the so-called Highway of Death. Among the most recognisable images of the Gulf War, the Highway of Death was the name given to Highway 80, the road leading from Kuwait City to Basra in Iraq. It was on this road that the final stages of the Gulf War played out, as American, Canadian, British and French air and ground forces attacked an Iraqi army convoy as it beat a panicked armed retreat across the border into Iraq.
We're trying to get away.
Swafford and his fellow Marines wander through the wreckage of a convoy of cars, some military, most civilian, seemingly awestruck by the scale of destruction. In filming Jarhead, Sam Mendes made the decision to use handheld camera work almost exclusively, giving the film a documentary-like feel. But another effect of that choice is that the camera remains at ground level and only reveals to the audience the short stretch of Highway 80 that the film's characters move through. As a result, we lose something of the broader landscape. The scale of destruction on Highway 80 was immense. Between 1,400 and 2,000 wrecked vehicles choked the 6-lane highway, all showing signs of the chaos of the Iraqi withdrawal. In beating a hasty retreat to the border, Iraqi soldiers had stolen civilian vehicles. Saloon cars, pickup trucks, motorhomes, buses. These units of Iraq's fighting force headed for the Kuwait-Iraq border on the night of February 26, 1991, before coming under attack from coalition forces in the air and on the ground. As more and more of the lead vehicles were destroyed or abandoned, their occupants killed or fleeing into the night, a grim pile-up developed, halting the convoy in its tracks amid the relentless barrage. Images of Highway 80 released the next day caused immediate controversy, with some commentators arguing the coalition's assault constituted excessive use of force as the Iraqi troops were retreating. US General Norman Schwarzkopf, who commanded coalition forces in the Gulf, justified the attack on the basis that the Iraqi forces had not surrendered. The footage of Highway 80 is thought to have significantly influenced US President George H.W. Bush's decision to call an end to hostilities the following day. The devastation of Highway 80 was a stark visual representation of the military imbalance between Iraqi forces and the US-led multinational coalition. On the day the war ended, ITN's Jeremy Thompson interviewed an American soldier of the 2nd Armoured Division who described what his unit saw as they travelled through Iraq.
What's it been like?
Devastation, total devastation. Just devastated Iraqi tanks all over the place. We come through one battlefield where it looked like the Iraqis were pointing their guns in one direction and the U.S. had come up from behind them possibly. They didn't even know they'd been hit. Tanks and bodies everywhere. Total devastation.
The precise number of people killed in the assault on Highway 80 is not known. The most credible surveys, based on first-hand accounts of survivors and those first on the scene in the immediate aftermath, estimate that between 800 and 1,000 were killed on Highway 80 and the Highway 8 coastal road to Basra, while around 2,000 Iraqi soldiers were taken prisoner.
What?
Oil wells! They lit up the oil wells!
Moments after Gyllenhaal's character is confronted with the horrors of Highway 80, his squad lays eyes on the spectacle of a horizon darkened by vast columns of black smoke, rising from dozens of oil wells set ablaze by retreating Iraqi troops. After being forced to march on as oil rains down on the desert, Swafford's squad are ordered to dig foxholes amid the raging fires. In one of the film's most poignant moments, Swafford interacts with a horse that comes wandering out of the smoke. So how do these scenes compare to real footage of the Kuwaiti oil fires?
As we move around, so you can see the fires on the horizon.
ITN's cameras first captured the fires on the 27th of February 1991, in the final 24 hours of the war.
Fires blazing everywhere you can see.
Once again, if anything, the real footage shows the scale of the disaster to be even greater than depicted in the film. A Kuwaiti engineer described how the fleeing Iraqi troops who destroyed the wells did so reluctantly, fearing what would happen if they disobeyed orders.
They did it. Some of them, they were forced to do it, and they were, said to us, we are forced, we don't want to do that, but we have to do it because we are ordered to do it. Otherwise they will be shot or executed or whatever.
Filming over the next 5 days, ITN's camera crews documented the damage wrought on Kuwait's natural environment. As oil rains continued to flood the desert, thick clouds of toxic smoke blocked out the sun, turning day into night. Locals facing the loss of their livelihoods despaired at the seemingly unstoppable pollution of the landscape. Livestock moaning in apparent distress grazed on the contaminated ground. Civilian engineers and environmental charities would work tirelessly over the following days, weeks and months to extinguish more than 700 individual well fires.
Other bunker.
Yes.
Not this bunker, another bunker.
These oil fires are also depicted briefly in David O. Russell's 1999 film Three Kings, starring George Clooney, Mark Wahlberg and Ice Cube as three soldiers travelling through Iraq on a hunt for stolen gold. The story takes place during the Anti-Saddam uprisings that immediately followed the Gulf War's end. In one of the film's earlier scenes, blazing oil wells form the backdrop as reporter Adriana Cruz, played by Nora Dunn, is driven through the Kuwaiti desert.
I already did this story, goddammit!
She is later seen observing a massive oil spill in the Persian Gulf and a number of oil-soaked birds struggling in the sand. In keeping with the film's darkly comic tone, Cruz complains,
This story has been so done.
Indeed, while the story unfolds in the immediate aftermath of the Gulf War, the oil spill depicted in this scene in fact took place over a month before and was widely reported on when Operation Desert Storm was in its initial air war phase. On the 25th of January 1991, ITN filmed at the coastal edge of Saudi Arabia's border with Iraqi-occupied Kuwait. One of the largest oil spills in history, the Gulf War oil spill is considered an act of environmental terrorism by Saddam Hussein, who ordered at least 4 million barrels of crude oil be dumped into the Persian Gulf in an attempt to deter an invasion by the coalition army amassed on Saudi Arabia's borders with Iraq and Iraqi-occupied Kuwait. The footage captured of oil-drenched cormorants struggling in the tide aligns starkly with the images presented in Three Kings. Set against the backdrop of anti-regime uprisings after the war's end, the film also convincingly depicts the desolation of Iraqi towns and rural communities as the renegade US soldiers drive around in search of Saddam's hidden gold. Here we can see the real aftermath of the violence captured by ITN film crews in places like Karbala.
Good job.
Put President Saddam Hussein on the air and let him tell us what we're doing wrong.
Our next film is Mick Jackson's 2002 drama Live from Baghdad, starring Michael Keaton as CNN producer Robert Wiener, on whose memoir the film is based. The story follows the struggles and successes of CNN's on-location news team in Baghdad during the Gulf War and depicts a number of key moments in the conflict, starting with Iraq's invasion of Kuwait.
Very nice tie.
The film opens with a reconstruction of Iraqi tanks entering Kuwait City, before cutting to real images of the invasion being played out on monitors in the CNN newsroom. Here, the filmmakers have used dramatic license to depict images of the invasion being broadcast live around the world. In fact, on the day the Iraqis crossed the border, there was not a single television news crew from anywhere in the world there to capture it. The first television pictures of the invasion, seen here in Live from Baghdad, were shot on an amateur video camera by Kevin Hayden, a Briton living in Kuwait. They reached ITN exclusively 10 days after Iraqi tanks rolled in, and were first broadcast on the 12th of August 1990. Through the window of Kevin Hayden's flat, the battle for Kuwait unfolds.
Stay away from the window.
The road, you know those two little sort of humpy speed bump body.
A number of people are seen fleeing to the British Embassy across the road.
Yeah, look, see?
Seeking political asylum. No, he can't get in, can he? Is he in?
There's mooring out at sea as well.
The Kuwaiti armoured cars have been deployed to defend the complex around the Emir's palace. It is the heart of the Kuwaiti government and the Iraqis' primary target.
Is that Iraqis? They're all falling back rapidly, aren't they? Now that's where up there they're all grouped together, aren't they? Yeah.
They were hiding behind the cars before.
He's definitely given that wall one up. These men have said they're in there or something. Wait, yeah, we could tell them. I can't believe they must think something's going on in there, must they? That shell fire.
Someone's shooting into that building. Someone is shooting from there into the building over there.
Don't like that corner of that block, does he? Have to go outside. I mean, the only thing is, we're perched up in the air. Who knows?
We then see a swarm of Iraqi helicopters descending on the neighbourhood. At this point, the filming stops, and the next thing we see are bullet holes in Hayden's apartment window, their flat having been fired on. The footage filmed by Kevin Hayden remains some of the most powerful footage of the day Iraq invaded Kuwait. But while the Gulf War would become the first major conflict to be broadcast live into people's homes, news cameras weren't rolling the day it began.
I'm sure we'll get the truth.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay.
Live from Baghdad captures something of the struggle of journalists working under the ever-watchful eye of the Saddam regime.
Finish, we go now.
Put President Saddam Hussein on the air and let him tell us what we're doing wrong.
Later in Live from Baghdad, Wiener's team score a journalistic coup by landing an interview with Saddam Hussein. We see Michael Keaton's character negotiating with Saddam's information minister, Naji al-Hadithi, and convincing him to grant CNN an interview on the basis that
People are going to die when the talking stops. Mr. President, pleasure.
in terms of realism, there isn't too much to say about Live from Baghdad's depiction of CNN's interview with Saddam Hussein, as the filmmakers spliced their dramatisation of the interview's setup with the real CNN interview which aired on the 29th of October 1990.
If an embargo could force the Americans to withdraw from one of their own states, say Hawaii, then maybe the Iraqis would consider withdrawing from Kuwait.
The same dry humour displayed by Saddam in his statement to CNN that Iraq would pull out of Kuwait when America pulls out of Hawaii was also on display when Saddam answered the first question put to him by ITN's Trevor McDonald.
Mr. President, the invasion of a neighbouring country with such calculated force and brutality is a very un-Arab thing to do, isn't it?
هل هو إنجليزي مثلا؟
Would it be an English thing then, for instance?
إذا كان غير عربي.
If it's not an Arab thing to do, would it be a British way?
ITN secured their interview on the 13th of November 1990, 2 weeks after CNN sat down with the Iraqi leader. Trevor McDonald would be the only British journalist to interview Iraq's president during the Gulf crisis. Discussing the Saddam interview in 2023, Sir Trevor McDonald said after many years of reflection, he believed his opening question had been needlessly aggressive. He also recalled how, during the interview, ministers of Saddam's government had hung around, fascinated by the spectacle of the feared dictator being made to answer questions. The climax of Live from Baghdad depicts the moment the first coalition bombs land on the Iraqi capital, as the air war of Operation Desert Storm begins. The film shows the city subjected to an earth-shattering bombardment, and Iraqi air defences firing blindly into the sky in a desperate effort to repel the attack.
starburst in the black sky.
Live from Baghdad's depiction of the first coalition air raid on Iraq aligns pretty closely with the actual footage captured on the 17th of January 1991. One obvious difference is that the real footage was filmed in night vision. The day after the first strikes on Baghdad, ITN spoke to journalists who had witnessed the air raid firsthand.
The bombardment was quite heavy. The anti-aircraft fire that the Iraqis put up to counter this was truly heavy. All kinds of tracers running through the night sky.
The nighttime bombardments are far worse because you can see everything, every bomb strike, every round of anti-aircraft fire going up. And so not only do you have the audio, you've got the vision as well, and it's much more dramatic, and the tracer is just incredible.
The area that we reckoned was being bombarded, clearly lighting up with flashes as something was hit.
This is the most professional bombing I've ever seen. It is very, very disciplined. There's no carpet bombing, there's no, I imagine there is in Kuwait, but at least in Baghdad.
There is no question that the bombardments were fierce.
It's quite frightening, quite frightening.
I was terrified. I don't mind telling you.
There he goes. There it goes.
In the following days and weeks, ITN's Brent Sadler covered the ongoing air war from Baghdad, visiting the sites of coalition airstrikes.
Do you think it was a cruise missile?
Cruise missile.
The ones that we saw before?
Absolutely, yes.
باوي على اشملك من انت اخذت غرفه وقفلت الغراب معود هذا خطر بابا صدام خلعت شلعت الشبابيك الجنب
The Gulf War remains a unique chapter in the history of modern warfare. Some 42 countries made up the international coalition opposing Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, with a total combined force of almost 1 million service personnel. A conventional war of such scale, with such broad international support, could not have happened in the Cold War, nor has it happened since. It also marked a watershed moment in the history of television news, as media organisations collaborated to produce live, rolling coverage of the war, broadcasting footage from the front line into homes around the world. And on the big screen, personal accounts of the conflict have inspired a number of filmmakers, and will no doubt continue to do so.
There he goes. There he goes.
Which movie do you think did the best job of depicting the Gulf War? Please remember to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave us a comment to tell us what you'd like to see us cover next.